Hello students, welcome to the series of video lectures for learning the details of diabetes and drugs acting on the diabetes mellitus. Fine. So in today's lecture, we are going to get details of diagnosis, diabetic complications, and we will have a brief discussion of the list of drugs, right, which are used right now in the treatment of diabetes. Fine. So let us start with the diagnosis. Now, a question that should come to a person, right? That when should I go for the checking of blood sugar level, right? Previously, it was a case that with the lifestyle, with the physical activity, the persons are having, right? Persons were having. Uh, the occurrence of type 2 diabetes was comparatively late. But as you all know that with the change in the diet habit, the lack of physical activity, right, and strong genetics, right, and these all making the onset of type 2 diabetes bit of early, right. So definitely your doctor is the best person, right, to advise you when to check the blood sugar level. But if a person is, you can say that is having, you can say that early signs, right, which are mentioned here, right, these all are related somewhere with the increase in the blood sugar level in your blood, and if any of these signs are present, definitely you should consult your doctor, and then you should go for measurement of the blood sugar level, right. So diagnosis definitely very simple is you can go for a urine test for glucose and ketones, right. These are not normal constituents of the glucose of the urine, and in that case if glycosuria and ketonuria is present, right, then it is an indicative of presence of diabetes. Definitely this ketonuria is more likely to happen in case of type 1 diabetes only. Fine. In early stage of type 2 diabetes, ketonuria is not there, right. Similarly, glucose definitely if is higher in the blood, uh, definitely higher level of glucose in urine can also be observed. But as compared to urine test, blood tests are more reliable, right? And that's why one should go for the measurement of blood sugar level for proper identification of, because that or for proper diagnosis of the diabetes mellitus. Okay, so blood sugar level definitely, if they are higher than 7 millimole per liter, right, fasting level, right, fasting definitely means you've not eaten anything, and then if your blood sugar level comes more than 7 millimole per liter, then you can consider that you are, maybe you are having a problem with the blood sugar, right. So that is an indicator of hyperglycemia. Similarly, if random blood sugar level, if they are higher than 11.1 millimole per liter, then also they are indicative that something is wrong. Fine. So this could be temporary condition also, right. Maybe sometime hormonal changes, right, in some disease, or maybe some drugs also can lead to such type of an, you can say that indication. But then definitely if repetitive, you can say it, values if they are having, then definitely you should go for the confirmation of diabetes, right. Also one more test is there, OGTT, that is oral glucose tolerance test, right. You know that in type 2 diabetes mellitus, not only the insulin resistance, but insulin secretion also is faulty, right. It is not properly been managed, and in that case it happens that if you give a load of you could say glucose, right, maybe it is possible that your normal homeostasis mechanism is not able to lower the blood sugar level, and in that case it is a better idea, right. It gives you better idea whether your body is able to tolerate that oral glucose or not, right. That is what you refer as a OGTT, that is oral glucose tolerance test. Fasting plasma glucose, if they are higher than 6.1 to 6.9, then they are indicative of, you can say that you can say that diabetes. And if random plasma glucose level are higher than 11 millimole per liter, right, then they are indicative of diabetes, right. These are normal values, right. What should be the value in case of oral glucose tolerance test? Some of you may get confused with this unit that I have expressed, millimole per liter, because most of the case uh, a normal patient uses glucometer, which gives value in milligram per dl. So here is a chart, you can just see that this is a chart which gives you a direct indication that what is the interconversion, right, between the millimole per liter to milligram per dl. Dl refers to deciliter, that is 100 ml, right. So as I said, that should be if it is more than 7 millimole per liter, then it is considered as a hyperglycemia, right? So approximately in terms of milligram per dl, this value is considered, right? That is a fasting sugar of 80 to 120 milligram per dl is considered as a normal. More than that, it is considered as a hyperglycemic. Similar interconversion you can use for the other values that I mentioned for OGTT or maybe for the random blood sugar level. Okay, so this chart definitely will help you in correlate the values. Also one more test, that is insulin level, that also helps you in differentiation of type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus. You know that type 1 diabetes is insulin deficiency diabetes, that is insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, and in that case value of insulin definitely is lower, while in case of type 2 the basal insulin level are either normal, sometime it is also higher than the basal, right? Because there is an insulin resistance, so body will be, you can say that, continuously sending a chemical message to the insulin that release more insulin, because hyperglycemia is continuously there, and that loop will continue send a message to the pancreas release more insulin. So normal it is, insulin levels are normal or higher than the normals, right? That is what is found in case of type 2 diabetes mellitus. C-peptide we will definitely consider when we will check the details of insulin, because this is the one which is synthesized and co-secreted from the pancreatic beta cells, right? And it is co-secreted with the insulin. And in that case, C-peptide levels are considered as a more reliable parameter as compared to insulin, because they are more stable, right? So they are, you could say, circulated in the blood for longer duration, and that also could be considered as a measurement whether your insulin levels in the blood are normal or you can say less, right? So C-peptide level gives an equal idea or better idea, right, that what your insulin status of your blood is there. This is an example, right, diagram of how patient measures you can say glucose at home, right? Definitely very easy instruments, or you can say user friendly instruments are nowadays available, and you can say monitoring of glucose at home also it is nowadays possible with the, you can say, such type of, right? These are called as a glucometers, right? This is just an animation that shows how to prick the finger and then how to just take the reading in the glucometer, right? There is also table, right, that I have given of fasting, you can say after eating, that is after taking meal, or maybe say for example after 2 to 3 hours after eating meal, right? This is what is been measured in case of OGTT, right? So this all values you can just see the green indicates that you are normal, right? This grayish color indicates that a person, if these readings have been there, then they could be pre-diabetic, and this red one indicate definitely diabetic, right? Values definitely will differ, right, from person, you can say that from as per the different agencies, right? If you go for a different organization, they will give you different values, but more or less they are same, right? All values which have been used for the diagnosis, they are more or less same. Definitely very soon we will have replacement of glucometers with HbA1c meter, right? This HbA1c meter measures hemoglobin A1c, that is called as a glycated hemoglobin. What is this glycated hemoglobin? You know that your RBCs, right, red blood cells, they have a lifespan of 120 days, right? And it is very definite that if the blood sugar level are higher, then in that case definitely there is a higher chance that this glucose will stuck to the cell surface, cell membrane of, you can say, that RBC. So this is a better, you can say, measurement, right? And right now it is the gold standard for the diagnosis as well as the management of diabetes. Why? Because if you go for a simple, you can say, fasting blood sugar level, it will give you an idea of that moment only, right? It will not give you idea of what was the glucose level 15 days back, right, or 1 month back. In that case, if you go for HbA1c measurement, it will give you an overall estimate of last 2 to 3 months glucose value, right? Say for example, it normally happens that a person, right, a patient who is having diabetes, if he knows that what is the date of visit of the doctor, right, in that case last 3-4 days they go for a strict diet, they take tablets or maybe the medication properly, and in that case within that 3-4 days the values of glucose, right, in the at the time of clinic visit it shows normal, Or it also be a possible that maybe say for example, if you are having some event, or maybe say for example a celebration at your home, and in that say for example last 3-4 days you are not able to manage your diet properly. Even if you have managed your diabetes very good in last 3 months, but then if last 3-4 days if you have not managed your diet, your glucometer will show you the readings which are not actually reflective of your disease status. So false positive, false negative test and bias is possible in that case. While HbA1c, because you are taking a blood sample which will be having RBCs of day 1 also and day 120 also. And if the higher sugar level is been there, right, say for example if you are not able to manage your glucose properly, then higher amount of glucose will be stuck to the cell membrane, and in that case that will be captured with these values, right, HbA1c, and that is why they are considered as a gold standard for the treatment as well, diagnosis as well as management of the. So very soon, maybe in next 5 years, instead of glucometer, right, patients of diabetes may be using this HbA1c meter, right. So that's a very good prospect, right. These are the, you can say, values. If the HbA1c are less than 5.7 percentage, it is considered as a normal, right. If it is between 5.7 to 6.5, 6.4, it is considered as a pre-diabetic, and if it is 6.5 or higher values are observed, then definitely it is indicative of a poor glycemic control or a diabetes status. Fine. So this is the interpretation, right? This is how you interpret your HbA1c level, right? I hope it was useful. Moving toward the diabetic complication, the major problem of uncontrolled hyperglycemia is you have all your organs, right, and all your cell surfaces coated with the sugar, coated with the glucose, and definitely there is a higher chance that because of the metabolic disturbances, now you will develop some organ complications related to kidney, eye, your cardiovascular system, cerebrovascular system, your neurons, which could lead to neuropathy, foot ulcers, and then amputations, right? And this is the reason why that patient of diabetes just you can say that once the one, you can say that a complication is over, then he will immediately have another organ complication, and then he just get tired of the life, right? Because you try to solve one problem and another problem will stuck to you, right? And that is what happens to you can say a patient of diabetes over a prolonged time. After 15 years, 20 years of uncontrolled hyperglycemia, many organs will be damaged, and eventually it is the reason why there is a higher morbidity, higher mortality in the diabetic patient. This is the list of diabetic complication. Definitely I'm not going to get in details of any of this diabetic complication. Maybe whenever I will discuss a PG level lecture, I will, you can say, go in depth of each of this, right? But right now this is the list of diabetic complication which you can just go through, right? Maybe in earlier video lecture also I have shown you that there are microvascular and macrovascular complication, right? Long term complication I'm just talking about, and that shows the, you can say, the size of the blood vessel, right? From that it is been named after, right? Moving toward the main theme of today's lecture, that is classification of anti-diabetic agents, right? And now onwards we will have individual video lecture for individual drug, right? The all categories that I'm going to show in this lecture, for each of that, you can say that you can say class, I'm going to take a separate video lecture, fine. But without wasting time, let's first check the detail of the drugs which can be used in treatment of diabetes. So first one, and very, you can say it, important one, that is, you can say that insulin, right? So in, you can say that type 1 diabetes mellitus, right, that is IDDM, and you can say later stage of type 2 diabetes mellitus, right? Insulin is the only, you can say option that physician has, right? Because in any of this case, right, type 1, you know that there is an insulin deficiency, and in type 2 also later stage it will lead to a situation where beta cell destruction and insulin deficiency can be created, and in that case insulin is the most valuable drug in case of treatment of diabetes. Because of the you can say very low, you can say biological half life, various analogs of insulins have been used. So based on the need of the patient of diabetes, and you can say that a variety of pharmacokinetic that these preparations are exhibited, they can be used maybe in as a single or maybe in a cocktails, right? So that insulin preparation we are going to get in detail wherever we will discuss insulin. Fine. Moving toward the next is the oral hypoglycemic agent. These are the one which are used in you can say that treatment of type 2 diabetes mellitus, right? Because they are to be taken by oral route, right? And they reduces the blood sugar level. That's why they are being named as a oral hypoglycemic agent. Although we will check that some of the drugs which are called as a insulin sensitizer, they can reduce the blood sugar level but not below the basal level of blood, that is 120 milligram per dl, and in that case they are better to be referred as a anti hyperglycemic agent and not as a hypoglycemic agent. Remember, hypoglycemic agent can decrease the value. Say for example, patient is having 180 milligram per dl blood sugar level. If you go for insulin, definitely insulin's few units of insulin will reduce the blood sugar level, maybe 150, 140, 120. And if you give a higher dose of insulin, it will reduce even below 120 milligram per dl. Same happens with the drugs which are called as a sulfonylureas. They are also able to reduce the sugar even below the basal levels, that is 120 milligram per dl. But if you check metformin, which is a biguanide class, then it is anti-hyperglycemic, right? It is better to be called as an anti-hyperglycemic because it can reduce that 180 milligram per dl value up to 120. But even if you go for a higher dose of metformin, it is not having a chances of producing hypoglycemia, right? So this is a basic difference between hypoglycemic agent and anti-hyperglycemic agent. But most of the case, all books, reference book, they do suggest these all drugs under the category of oral hypoglycemic agents only. Fine. So let's check the example of those all drugs. Starting with the first one, sulfonylureas, right? So very old drugs, right? Again, type very ancient drugs, right? Which are used in treatment of type 2 diabetes, right? So basically sulfonamides, right? Which you know that is an antibiotic, right? And sulfonylureas are closely structurally related. And the history of sulfonylurea, right? The discovery of sulfonylurea is also related with the sulfonamide, which we'll discuss somewhere, right? Wherever we'll discuss sulfonylureas. Basically, you can again classify these sulfonylureas into two categories. That is first generation sulfonylureas and second generation sulfonylureas. First generation sulfonylureas like chlorpropamide, they are having a problem of severe hepatotoxicity. Also the potency was less, and that's why there was a need to develop newer sulfonylureas, right? So these are the one, glibenclamide, glipizide, these are newer sulfonylureas. All of these, they have a tendency to produce hypoglycemia, right? Just like insulin, right? And the reason why they produces hypoglycemia as a side effect is because these sulfonylureas are actually insulin secretagogues, right? Insulin secretagogue means one which can stimulate the release of insulin from the pancreatic beta cell. If I say that if these are insulin secretagogue, that also means that use of sulfonylureas is only to be considered in a case, right, when a patient is having functional beta cells in their body, right? If the functional beta cells are not there, that is what is case in case of late onset, or you can say, advanced level of type 2 diabetes, right? Maybe third or fourth stage of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Then in that case, sulfonylureas are not effective. Okay. This is the brief discussion about sulfonylureas, right? So definitely it can be used, but they are used in the early stage diabetes, right? Where your diet and exercise is not helping, then you can start with the sulfonylureas. The reason why sulfonylureas are useful in type 2 diabetes mellitus, right? Because you should ask question to yourself that type 2 diabetes, the major problem is insulin resistance. Then why you are using sulfonylureas, right? So I keep it as a question only. Okay, if you are you can say that, a researcher, right? Or maybe say for example as a curious student, you should ask your question, a question that is, if sulfonylureas are insulin secretagogue agent, that means they are just increasing the insulin secretion from the pancreas, then why they are used in type 2 diabetes mellitus where the major problem is insulin resistance. Okay, I hope that you will give answer in the comment section. Fine. Moving toward the next category is biguanide anti-diabetic agents, and a very important drug, metformin, fenformin, right? This, as I told you, they are not having a side effect of hypoglycemia, right? Because they act as an insulin sensitizer, right? So they reduces basically insulin resistance, and in that case these are very important drug. Right now also they are considered a first choice medication by many diabetologists. Okay. Apart from the diabetes, they are also used in many conditions where there is an insulin resistance. Say for example PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, right? So in that case also, if it is accompanied by insulin resistance, metformin is used in those therapies. Third category is thiazolidinediones, right, which is a chemical category, right? Pharmacologically, they are referred as a glitazones. These drugs, once been introduced, were considered as a very prospective molecules, right, because of their unique mechanism of action, that is PPAR gamma agonist, right? Peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma, right? That is activated by thiazolidinediones, right? And by that virtue, by activating this PPAR gamma, they produces insulin sensitization, that is they reduces insulin resistance. But unfortunately, either because of the hepatotoxicity associated with this drug, that is C-glitazone, which was first drug to be introduced in this category, right? Troglitazone, right? These all drugs were, you could say, their therapeutic usefulness was limited by the presence of hepatotoxicity. Also, one more drug that is not mentioned here, but that is rosiglitazone. That is producing cardiovascular adverse effect, edema and cardiovascular adverse effect, and that is the reason why it was withdrawn from the market by US FDA in 2003. And right now, pioglitazone, euglitazone are used, but then also their use is less preferred. Right? That's why I said earlier that they were considered as a very prospective molecule, but unfortunately, the clinical effects are not, you can say that, or you can say that the safety margin is not that good, right, for, you can say, long-term use in case of diabetes mellitus. Fourth category is alpha glucosidase enzyme inhibitor. You know that this is an enzyme which converts polysaccharide into disaccharide and monosaccharide. And if you inhibit this enzyme, the absorption of, you can say that, digestion and absorption of the carbohydrates, right, definitely can be hindered. So in that case, definitely those patients who are not able to manage their diet properly, those who are not able to control their diet habits, right? Say for example, direct sugar definitely should not be taken by the patient. But some patients still go for a food which is rich in starch, like potatoes, right, rice, right? In that case, doctor may indicate alpha glucosidase inhibitor, and example of that is acarbose and miglitol, right? So this is the one. I hope you have remember each of this class. I am just hiding these details, hiding this name. You can just pause the video and you can definitely go for the names of this individual class, right? Starting with the first one, sulfonylurea. First generation sulfonylureas include tolbutamide and chloropropamide. Very good. Second generation sulfonylureas, very good, it is glipizide and glibenclamide, right? Remember that this first generation and second generation, their blood sugar level lowering ability is equal, right? So efficacy wise there is no difference is in the side effect, right? Say for example, chloropropamide is long acting analog, right? It is also having hepatotoxicity. In any case, it cannot be even geriatric patient, right? And because of the hepatotoxicity and availability of better drugs, definitely this drug is now no more in the clinical practice, right? This drug definitely are available: glibenclamide, glipizide, tolbutamide. Second category is biguanide. Can you give me name of those agents, right, which are classified, which are example of biguanide derivatives? Right, very good. It is fenformin and metformin. Thiazolidinediones, examples includes glitazones. Can you recall what is the mechanism of action of these glitazones? Yes, it is PPAR gamma agonist, right? They are PPAR, that is peroxisome proliferator activated receptor gamma, right? Again, I would like to say here that this is actually discovered, right? It was a chance discovery, that because PPAR alpha agonists, you know that PPAR alpha agonists are actually fibrates, right, which are anti-hyperlipidemic agent. And while checking the effects of those PPAR alpha agonists, what they observed, that they also reduces blood sugar level, and from that you can say observation, this C-glitazone was developed, right? But as I told you that there is a problem, that is hepatotoxicity. Also with some drugs like rosiglitazone, there is a cardiovascular toxicities, and that is the reason why these drugs are, you can say, not that frequently been prescribed. Right. Moving toward the next one is alpha glucosidase inhibitor, and example includes acarbose and miglitol. Right. Moving toward the next categories. Right. Same you can say in oral hypoglycemic agent. Fifth one is GLP-1 analog. Right. GLP-1 refers to glucagon-like peptide. Right. So this GLP-1, right, is actually an incretin. Right. Incretin, in a words that there are two types of, you can say, compounds which you can consider for pancreatic for stimulating the pancreatic secretion. You know that pancreas is a mixed gland, right? So it is having exocrine gland, exocrine part and endocrine part. So if exocrine secretions are stimulated by a chemical, then it is called as a excretin. And if endocrine part is being stimulated by some chemical, then it is called as a incretin. So this one, this GLP-1, there is one more example, that is GIP. GIP refers to gastric inhibitory peptide, right, or gastrin inhibitory peptide, right. These two are incretins. That means they do stimulate the pancreas to release their hormone, and definitely insulin is so it's an insulinotropic, or you can say insulinomimetic agent that you can consider. But the problem with the GLP-1 is its very short biological half-life. So as such, GLP-1 cannot be used. And that is the reason why synthetic analogs for GLP-1 were developed. And this is an example. Exenatide, liraglutide, lixisenatide, right? These are some of the examples which you consider as a GLP-1 analog. The advantage with this GLP-1 analog is also that they reduces weight. Right, you remember that type 2 diabetes patient, most of those are obese, and in that case GLP-1 analog can provide an additional benefit, right, because they do inhibit the satiety center in the brain. Next is DPP-4 enzyme inhibitors. Right, DPP-4 refers to dipeptyl peptidase 4 enzyme. Now this is an enzyme which inhibits the metabolism of GLP-1. See, so here we are going for two approaches, right? One first approach that we have learned, that to go for a synthetic GLP-1 analog, right? So that biological half-life can be increased, and that is how the blood sugar lowering effect could be produced. So one approach was to develop a synthetic analog. Second approach, which is more clinically it is been showing to have a beneficial effect, that is inhibition of an enzyme which is responsible for metabolism of GLP-1. Now if you stop the metabolism, definitely the physiological release of GLP, right, it is definitely not going to be disturbed, right. What you are doing is just you are just increasing the half-life of GLP-1, right. So you are not giving any synthetic analog. What you are doing is the action of GLP-1 itself will be increased, right. So that is what the try was with the DPP-4 inhibitor, right. And a very important category of drugs, right, which are right now being used in the clinical practice, that is gliptins, right. So vildagliptin, sitagliptins, saxagliptin, gemigliptin, these are some of the examples which are DPP-4 inhibitor, right. So action of both of this is, you can say, very easily you can just you can understand, right. And if you just remember in a sequence, right, you will be able to remember in a better way. Moving toward the next category is amylin analog. Amylin, you know that in variety of, you can say, disease, amyloid deposits are being found, right, as an extracellular deposit, right. Amyloid protein can be found, right. Amylin as such inhibits, you can say, that insulin secretion, right, physiologically, right. So that may, you can say, create a mystery that if it is inhibiting the you can say insulin level, then what is the reason we are using this amylin analog, that is pramlintide, right, in treatment of diabetes. The reason why we are using is because this is reducing the tendency of amyloid to aggregate into insoluble fibril, right. So it is again questionable, right, whether these amyloid proteins, whether they do have what sort of a role in pathology of diabetes. But still preliminary studies have shown you could say very good results, and this you will be surprised to know that apart from the insulin, this was the first drug that was you could say approved by US FDA for treatment into type 1 diabetes, right? Definitely in combination with insulin, but then in that case this was a after many years, right? It was a first drug, right, to be introduced in treatment of type 1 diabetes, right? So amylin analog, right, it works by you can say that reducing the tendency of amyloid aggregates, right, in the pancreas, which are thought to have an important role in the pathology of type 1 diabetes, right? So definitely it's a prospective molecule, right, pramlintine, and it is an amylin analog, right? Next category is sodium glucose co-transporter inhibitor, right? What you call as a SGLT, you can say that inhibitors, right? So definitely this S refers to sodium, GL definitely that is glucose, and T refers to transporter. So SGLT inhibitors, these are inhibiting the a transportation of glucose from the proximal convoluted tubule, right? There are two types of, because that SGLTs, SGLT1 and SGLT2. This your drug, that is gliflozins, they do inhibit SGLT1, right? By doing so, they do not allow glucose to be reabsorbed back into the blood. If there is no reabsorption, definitely they will be excreted in the urine, and that is how they are reducing the blood sugar level, right? And that is the reason why, because they are increasing the glucose excretion in the urine. That is the reason why they are referred as a glycosuric agents, right? Glycosuric agent mean one which can produce glycosuria, right? You must be aware of a term that is uricosuric agent, right? You know that they are used in treatment of gout, right? So the one which produces uricosuriia, that is called as a uricosuric agent. Similarly, one which produces glycosuria, that is called as a glycosuric agent, right? So dapagliflozin, sanagliflozin, empagliflozin, right? All gliflozin, these are sodium glucose transporter inhibitor. Remember that these are SGLT1 transporter inhibitor, right? Last category is the lean kinase activator, that is tomilidone, right? So it activates a protein, right, which is thought to have an important role in insulin resistance, that is lean tyrosine kinase, right? And once this kinase is activated, then insulin sensitization do occur, and this prospective molecule, so it is not much in therapeutic, but then definitely it is an option, therapeutic option that we have, right? So example is tolimidone, fine. uh, See, diabetes is a kind of a disease, right, which is prevalent in developed countries as well as developing countries, right? And prevalence of diabetes also is gradually is increasing, and that is the reason why pharma companies always go for research of a drug where they definitely will find more income. Diabetes, cancer, right? These are some of the thirst areas, right? Hypertension, right? So there is a continuous research in, you could say, anti-diabetic molecules, right? Say for example, right now scientists are working on selective beta 3 agonist. You know that it's an adrenergic receptor, right? But then beta 3 do have a role in lipolysis as well as carbohydrate metabolism. So they are right now they are trying to go for a selective beta 3 agonist. Definitely it is a development stage. We have not come with any drug which is approved by US FDA or any regulatories, right? Similarly, that protein kinase C inhibitors, right? Say for example ruboxytaurin, that is also developed for treatment of diabetes. But right now the what drug that are approved by US FDA, that is what the list we have discussed until now. Okay. First four categories of oral hypoglycemic agent I have already asked you, and the next you can say that five categories just I'm going to ask you. So you just you can pause the video, you can just remember this name, and then you can definitely you can just play, right, to whether your examples are right or not, right? So I'm hiding this content, I'm locking this content. Hope you will be able to understand and you will be able to remember each of this example, right? So GLP-1 analog, first you need to remember, you have to understand that why we are giving GLP-1 analog, right? Reason is we want to produce action which is similar to GLP-1, right? GLP-1 is an incretin, right? It do stimulate the pancreatic beta cell to release insulin, right? But the problem with that is the physiological you can say peptide is their low biological half-life, and that is the reason why we have been prompted to produce and synthetic analogs, right, which are having a higher biological half-life, right? So GLP-1 analog, definitely it is your exenatide, liraglutide, lixisenatide, right? Similarly, just like we have gone for a development of synthetic analogs, you can also go for, you can say, enzyme inhibitors, enzyme which is responsible for metabolism of GLP-1. So DPP-4 inhibitors are those examples, right? And definitely all, you can say, that gliptins, vildagliptin, sitagliptin, saxagliptin, gemagliptin are examples. Amylin analog, very good, and only one important example is pramlintide. Okay. Similarly, these are example of glycosurics, right? That is SGLT1 inhibitor, right? What you call as a glycosurics, which have their mechanism of action in the nephron, proximal convoluted tubules. They do act, and they produces glycosuria, and that is how they are useful in the treatment of diabetes, right? So example of those include gliflozins, right? So dapagliflozin, senagliflozin, empagliflozin. And last one is lean tyrosine kinase protein activator, and only important and one example in this category is tolimedon. Okay, so that completes our list of current anti-diabetic drug, right? I hope you have gone through the old drugs, right, which have been used in the management, as well as I will try to give you a glimpse of latest examples, right, what the current development in the anti-diabetic categories have been there, and maybe in future, right, this some of these drugs, right, they could be considered as a better therapeutic option, right? So this is the list of anti-diabetic drug. With this slide, I will, conclude today's lecture. That is, diabetes definitely is a bigger burden, right? The burden that we actually consider, it is much more bigger as compared to that. You can just see that the difference in the prevalence between 1990s to 2016, right? These data are up till 2016, but then you can just see that what rise we have observed, right, in the prevalence of diabetes across the India, right? Red one indicates there is an more than 50% rise in the prevalence of diabetes, right? If you talk about Gujarat, right, somewhere between 36 to 40% rise in the diabetic population is being observed. So somewhere we need to think about our diet, our exercise, maybe of yoga, meditation, right? Also we need to check our genetics, that what probability, what chances, if we are having, if there is a higher chance, you can say chances, say for example if your mother or father is diabetic, then definitely you also somewhere catch diabetes maybe in future, right? And in that case it is our duty, or it is definitely as a, because that a healthy, because that being a part of healthy society, right, it is a need that we go for the change in the diet, we change our lifestyle, go for physical activities, exercise, yoga, meditation, and definitely that will help to reduce this scenario, right? Because definitely a good health is always, you can say that, a good wealth, right? So with